melting ice caps, bizarre weather phenomena, vanishing forests, and dying species. All these form a texture of our daily news cycle. And all these can be traced back to a single phenomena: climate change. Now, if you look at it from one perspective, climate change has been a constant. Our planet's climate has always been changing. There have been times where Earth's climate has been warmer than it is now. And there have been times when it has been cooler, like the Ice Age. So if this is a natural phenomenon, what is different about the climate change we are talking about today? 1. The current period of warming is occurring more rapidly than past events. 2. Scientists believe that human activity is causing this change in the climate. Activities like burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and land use changes have drastically increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. First off, let's see how carbon dioxide leads to warming. This is through the greenhouse effect. Let's see how that works. When solar energy from the sun reaches the earth, it is absorbed by the earth's atmosphere. At night, when the earth cools, some of this heat is released, and some is trapped by certain gases in the atmosphere like carbon dioxide and methane. These gases are called greenhouse gases since they keep the earth warm like a greenhouse. Now, this warmth is essential to sustain life and make Earth habitable. Now, what is happening is that the levels of these greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are increasing. And so, the atmosphere is trapping more and more heat and temperatures are rising. Everyone keeps talking about climate change. But is it possible to measure this change in a tangible way? Scientists use sophisticated instruments and satellites to map and measure climate parameters. The planet's average surface temperature has increased about 1.1 degrees Celsius since the late 19th century. This might seem like a small change, but temperatures on Earth change very slowly. Just to put it in perspective, the end of the Ice Age was just 5 to 9 degrees cooler than it is today. Now much of this heat is absorbed by oceans. There is also a 30% increase in the acidity of these oceans as they absorb more carbon dioxide. One of the impacts of this is destroying ocean life like coral reefs. So if this trend continues by 2050, only 5% of the Great Barrier Reef with all its teeming life forms will survive. The sea level has risen about 1 to 20 centimeters in the last century. The rate in the last 2 decades, however, is nearly double that of the last century. This is likely to have devastating impact on coastal habitats. Ice sheets are melting and glaciers are retreating. Between 2002 and 2005, the ice sheets of Antarctica shrunk by more than 150 cubic centimeters. Let's explore one or two of these phenomena in more detail to see how it can change our world and the way we live in it. Let's look at glaciers in a little more detail. Maybe in the Himalayas, which are home to over 50,000 glaciers. These glaciers form the world's largest ice bodies outside of the polar caps. They are often referred to as the Water Tower of Asia, as they are the source of water for rivers that flow across the continent. Now, are glaciers actually melting? The easiest way to figure in these areas which are difficult to access is by using satellite imagery. And the Indian Space Research Organization has been mapping these areas since the 1980s. The data they have on 2,190 glaciers show that about 76% glaciers have shown loss in area of ice cover. This means that the glaciers are melting faster than they are being replenished by precipitation. Now, the melting or retreat of glaciers is likely to increase the number of glacial lakes, and also expand the size of existing ones, posing threats for catastrophic floods. For preventing such events, precise and timely mapping and monitoring of these glacial lakes is necessary. ISRO is also monitoring all the large lakes and water bodies in this region. Their learnings indicate that there is an increase in water spread in 218 water bodies, while 35 have shrunk and the rest did not show any major change. These figures keep changing annually, but it is clear that there is a change.
See, the glaciers are receding across the world, not from today, from since many centuries, I will say. Scientists believe that the global warming might have some impact on the receding of the glaciers, although this relation is not established one-to-one.
Are there other ways in which we can map global warming, or is there actual data to show temperature rise? We traveled to IIT Bombay to see how temperature rise in India has been mapped over a period of 60 years. This study was done in IIT Bombay in Delhi along with University of California, Irvine, Los Angeles and Boise State University in USA. In this research, the temperature between the years 1960 to 2009 was studied from 395 weather stations of the India Meteorological Department. The data from the 4 years 1972, 1988, 1998 and 2003 showed that there were more than 10 heat wave days on average across India. The researchers' results suggest that the future climate warming will lead to substantial increase in heat-related deaths, particularly in low-altitude countries such as India, where heat waves will become more and more frequent. The ravages of climate change are apparent even to the unscientific eye when we look at images like this. Besides all this science and theory, climate change can impact lives in very real ways also. It can affect the livelihoods of farmers like Khushiram Dabral in Uttarakhand. Like many others in this area, he used to grow apples. But with the change in temperature, apples today can only grow at higher altitude.
पहले हमारे सेब का बगीचा था यहाँ पे और बर्फ़ भी यहाँ खूब गिरती थी और सेब भी अच्छा होता था, लेकिन कुछ सालों से ऐसा हुआ कि न तो यहाँ बर्फ़ गिर रही तो बहुत कम गिर रही है और बारिश भी टाइम से नहीं होती है, कभी ज़्यादा होती है तो कभी कम होती है, कभी ज़्यादा धूप होती है, कभी ज़्यादा गर्मी पड़ती, मतलब सर्दी हो जाती है, बारिश भी ज़्यादा हो जाती है.
And so now, Khushiram is now planting peaches. Other farmers grow a new variety of apple that can grow in this altitude and temperature. These farmers may have come up with a solution, but there are many other farmers, many of the most impoverished in our country, who are actually suffering because of the changes in our climate.
The irony of it is that the poorest in the world, the people who are least responsible for the emissions in the atmosphere, are the worst impacted today. It's our farmers today who are suffering the worst impacts of the beginnings of climate change.
So how do we combat this? The only way forward, nations coming together with a single coherent mission to reduce carbon emissions, to battle climate change, to fight for a better world. Many attempts have been made to achieve this ever since the setting up of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 1988. The first big success was the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. Many others met with less consensus. Until in December 2015, a historic agreement was forged in Paris. At this global climate change conference, an international accord was reached that aimed at keeping global temperature rise in this century below 2 degrees Celsius. As of November 2017, 195 UNFCCC members have signed the agreement and 170 have become party to it.
I would argue that each country today needs to do as much as it can to reduce emissions, but at all times, at the global level, we must insist on the principle of equitable distribution of the global commons, because the right to development and the right to economic growth cannot become so iniquitous.
Now, what set this agreement apart? Well, unlike earlier conferences, this accord let each country set its own goal for limiting and slowing carbon emission, for fighting deforestation, and for finding solutions to combat the adverse effects of climate change. This was historic. Now the lens has changed. You didn't need to agree with everyone. You choose your own contribution and stick to it. And if everyone does this, hopefully there will be real, tangible change. Now India has ratified the Paris Agreement. This is very significant since we are the fourth largest carbon dioxide emitter after China, US and the EU. India had started work on reducing emissions way before the agreement. Battle started in 2008 when a National Action Plan on Climate Change, or NAPCC, was worked out that aimed at creating sustainable development while keeping a focus on reducing carbon emissions. Now, this plan had 8 core missions: the National Solar Mission, the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, the National Water Mission, the National Mission for Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem, the National Mission for a Green India, the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, and the National Mission on Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change.
Out of 8 missions, 4 were on the mitigation, 3 on adaptation, and 1 was on knowledge mission. All these 8 put together addresses India's priority and concern for climate change action.
All these ideas sound inspiring, but do they translate on the ground? After the break, we are going to explore practical solutions on the ground in India to battle climate change. In our exploration of climate change, we travel through India to explore some initiatives on the ground that will help this country reduce carbon emissions and meet her targets. Now, one of the big drivers of climate change is the burning of fossil fuels. And so, creating and using cleaner energy sources can make a big change. And with India's climate, solar energy is clearly the way forward. But solar energy needs to become more prevalent and needs to be cost competitive with coal power. We head into Rajasthan to see how this translates on the ground. This state clearly has a huge capacity to create solar energy. This is because of solar radiation data, which is the amount of solar energy that can be converted into thermal or electrical energy. Much of India receives this huge amount of solar radiation, but Rajasthan, with its deserts and vast arid lands, is a favorable location for large solar projects.
One reason, of course, is that they have the maximum sun availability because of the climate, the dry climate in the state. Another reason is that they have enough land, huge land, which cannot be used otherwise, which is full of sand dunes. So if I see the potential in Rajasthan, it is something to the tune of around 140 gigawatts. So out of that 750 gigawatt, 140 gigawatt potential is in Rajasthan.
Now, the development of reasonably priced and accessible solar technologies, both photovoltaic and solar thermal, are key to making solar a viable option on the ground. Let's quickly see how a photovoltaic cell works. Very simply, when the sun's light is absorbed by a solar cell, it increases the energy of the electrons in the cell. This causes them to break away from their atoms. These electrons flow into a conductor in the solar cell and form a direct current, or DC. Now this technology can help in simple ways by lighting villages, railway stations, helping farmers irrigate their lands, and by not adding to the world's rapidly accelerating carbon footprint. Let's move away from energy to another problem that haunts our ever-expanding urban areas: the huge amount of waste that India generates. To focus our issue more specifically, we travel to the city of Pune in Maharashtra. As in the case of any big city, Pune generates a huge amount of waste, about 1600 to 1700 tons daily. Much of this waste is dumped in the Devachi Uruli landfill site, which is located outside the city. Now, the interesting thing about waste is that much of the organic waste can be used more usefully. So if this waste is burnt in a special facility, the chemical energy is transformed into thermal energy. This can be further transformed into electrical energy using a turbine. Another energy resource that comes from our garbage is the methane gas that is produced as the waste decays. This gas can be used as fuel. And so, instead of burdening the landfill, the city of Pune decided to set up bioenergy plants that would convert the waste into useful biogas. Currently, there are 25 such plants in the city. The power generated in these plants is then used to operate street lights in Pune. Alongside this, there is also a special bio-CNG plant that generates green automobile fuel from the city's organic waste. And so, the city is all set to launch a fleet of buses that will run on biofuel. This kind of innovation reduces our carbon emission and helps create habitable cities by creatively using waste. We will explore sustainable architecture in our cities and ways for the farmers to sustain in the face of climate change after the break. We are exploring ways in which India can reduce carbon emissions. One way is by creating greener cities. And this has many aspects to it: renewable energy, sustainable public transport, waste management, and pollution control. But today, we also need to look at the way we actually build our cities, where we use the right construction materials and design techniques to make our buildings more energy efficient and green. To see how this works more closely, we head to the Terry Institute in Haryana to see the technologies that made it more sustainable.
So let me show you what makes this building green. First of all, we are not dependent on the city for water and electricity. All the windows in this building face either north or south. This ensures that ample sunlight comes in during the winters but does not come during the summer.
This is known as passive solar architecture and again helps reduce the building's energy needs.
Moreover, all the walls and the roof of this building are insulated, which ensures that additional radiation is cut off.
This kind of insulation prevents heat flow in the building, so one reduces loss of heat in winter and heat surplus in summer, and this clearly reduces the energy needs of the building. The building is equipped with a host of solar panels on the rooftop to optimize the amount of power generated. Along with this, there are gasifiers that use organic matter to generate electricity.
I'm sitting at the entrance of the Earth Air Tunnel. 4 meters below the ground, the temperature remains constant, whether it is summer or winter. We take the air from the outside through this tunnel, then we pump it into the rooms to provide natural air conditioning. This is the root zone treatment system of the project. This is where all the sewage waste gets treated. The treated water is then reused for gardening.
This institute shows us that with the right thought and planning, sustainable and energy efficient structures are eminently feasible in our cities. As we discussed earlier, the community deeply affected by climate change is the farmer. Now, according to the UNPCC, food production accounts for almost 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Why, you may wonder? Agricultural activities responsible for greenhouse gas emissions include the use of nitrogen fertilizer, synthetic herbicides and insecticides, fossil fuel consumption, and the transportation of materials. Which is why organic farming could be a huge ally in the fight against climate change. This is because organic cultivation shows a better performance in terms of greenhouse gas emissions than conventional by almost 60%. Which is why many states in India like Sikkim are now 100% organic. And this is just the start. Many others are following suit. We are now heading to a village in the state of Uttarakhand to explore innovative, sustainable ways of farming which could become key to reducing the impact of climate change on the farmer. One innovation that worked in here is the use of poly houses made of net and polythene. These protect the crops from sunlight and help them cope with climatic variation. As the temperature is in control, it is now possible to grow off-season vegetables.
इससे मतलब सुरक्षा है, सब चीज़ की सुरक्षा है, मक्खियाँ नहीं आती और जंगली जानवर नहीं आते और सब्जियाँ ज़्यादा उगती है, ज़्यादा मात्रा में उगती है इसके अंदर, इसलिए पोली हाउस का निर्माण किया है.
Protecting the fertility of the soil is also key. Due to the excessive use of fertilizers, the soil loses nutrients like nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And so, the farmers have started using manure made in a compost pit. This prevents the attack of pests while protecting the fertility of the soil.
हम लोग बाहर की खाद वगैरह कम डालते हैं, गांव की जैसे कंपोस्ट भी कंपोस्ट ही डालते हैं अपने खेतों में. अपनी गाय भैंस पाल रखी है हमने, किसी की ज़्यादा होगी तो बाहर भी बेचते हैं. उससे हमारा मतलब आय भी बढ़ती है महिलाओं की.
Other safe pest management techniques have also been worked in. For example, a spray made from this manure. When this is sprayed on the onion plant, it keeps insects away without harming the soil, water, or the environment. Light traps like this are also set up in areas near the fields. Now these capture insects like the white grub and beetles that could otherwise damage crops. The key to sustainable agriculture is not just creating practices that protect the environment, but are also profitable and good for communities. These are just some of the initiatives on the ground. A small sampling to show that change is happening. More needs to be done at an individual, community, national, and international level. Climate change has emerged as the biggest developmental challenge for the planet. And everyone needs to join hands to do as much as we possibly can to ensure the well-being of our world.